In the previous video, I wrote a compound argument showing that this argument form here is valid. And to do that, what I did was start with two premises that went together. That was Q implies R and not R. And I realized that those made a modus tollens argument allowing me to conclude not Q. And then I used the not Q with this other premise to conclude P by a disjunctive syllogism. So that was working forwards, starting from these premises and working my way forwards to get to this conclusion. And I could also write the same compound argument working backwards. So if I start from the conclusion I'm trying to reach, which is P, then I can fill in the blanks backwards. First, let's identify what premise I would need to use to reach this P as my conclusion. It will have to be a premise that involves P, which is this one, P or Q. So I'm going to need to use that one. But there's a missing premise here because this by itself will not be a valid argument form. This just says, I either like tea or coffee, therefore I like tea. For this to be valid, I would need to eliminate the other option, which is I like coffee. I would need to know that it's not that I like coffee. Intuitively, I need to know I don't like coffee to say I either like tea or coffee, I don't like coffee, therefore I like tea. And this one is a valid argument form. It's a disjunctive syllogism. But at the moment, this argument form is not convincing to someone who believes just these three premises, because I've used a premise that I haven't convinced them of. I've assumed that they believe not Q, and that means I need to convince them that they should believe not Q. So I'm working further backwards. I need to convince them that not Q is true, and that means I need to use a premise that involves Q, such as this one, Q implies R. But this by itself, again, wouldn't be a convincing argument if I just say, if I like coffee, then I'll buy coffee beans, therefore I don't like coffee. That by itself wouldn't be valid. But if I had another premise here that said, I don't buy coffee beans, then we would be able to use that to conclude, therefore, that I don't like coffee, which is what I want to conclude here. So if I wrote down not R, I don't buy coffee beans, now this is a valid argument form. If I like coffee, I'll buy coffee beans. I don't buy coffee beans, so I don't like coffee. That's modus tollens. And now I'm done, because I'm only using premises that this person already believes. I'm only using these two premises here. And that allows me to conclude not Q, which I can then use as a premise in the next step, along with the P or Q, which they already believe. So each step only uses premises that this person is already convinced of. And this is exactly the same compound argument that I reached in the previous video. This just shows a second strategy, working backwards from the conclusion, rather than starting from the premises and working forwards.